I don't want to watch your stupid video. Just tell me what are the best tier 4s for the Fantastic Four. Okay. Number 1, Invisible Woman Ultimate. Number 2, Human Torch Ultimate. Number 3, Invisible Woman Special. Number 4, Mr. Fantastic Special. Number 5, Human Torch Special. Number 6, Human Torch Passive. And number 7, The Thing Special. And then specifically for Alliance War, Namor Passive, Namor Ultimate, and Namor Special.
What's up, guys? So this video is sponsored by ClanHQ, which is a fully featured messaging app that specializes in building integrations for your favorite games. They've already got all the features you know and love, including stickers, GIFs, photos, albums, notes, reactions, extensive notification and badging settings, full admin controls, the ability to set up an alliance, assign leaders and officers, etc. But here's where it gets awesome. Because this app is designed to integrate with Marvel Strike Force, it will do a lot for you automatically, like create general leadership and announcement chats when you make an alliance, including chats for each strike team. You'll always be able to view someone's in-game name. You can flag yourself as looking for an alliance, or auto-post to recruiting chats if you're looking for members. You'll even be able to look at someone's profile and see things like their total collection power and strongest team power. I'll put a link to ClanHQ in the video description below, so you can be one of the first to check them out.
What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Orange Essentials. Today we're going to be talking about the hotly requested Fantastic Four. Now you may have noticed that Drax is on the graphic, so if you were confused about that, for Alliance War, which is really where they shine, I absolutely just run the Fantastic Four plus Namor and they destroy pretty much anything. However, for other game modes like Blitz, they're actually a lot more reliable to use with Drax on the team. And I say this because a lot of times what really threatens them as a team is early burst before the Invisible Woman is able to take her first turn. And so Drax really kind of shores that up, makes sure that no one kills Human Torch or kills Sue before she's able to take her first turn. So I actually really like Drax as a 5th on the team. And as for the primary purpose of this team, they are an excellent war offense team, but they were pitched to us as a very versatile team. So I'm hoping that in the future we get characters like Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, stuff like that to kind of act as a strong 5th for different game modes for these guys. But on that note, let's get right into it. We will start off with Mr. Fantastic. Alright, so taking a look at Mr. Fantastic's basic. The upgrade to level 7 adds 40% more damage to the primary target, it adds a 3rd chain target, and it adds 40% damage to the chain targets. So that's certainly not bad. I mean, hitting an extra chain target is really good. However, Mr. Fantastic doesn't really have a ton of damage, so that extra 40% isn't that much. And then hitting a 4th target on his chain, I mean, the targets have to all be alive for him to chain to, and a lot of times he doesn't use that until his 3rd turn. And then, again, ultimately, you know, the 4th chain target getting hit is very rarely going to decide a match, if ever. So it's certainly not a bad upgrade, but it's definitely not essential. So for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, next we're going to take a look at Mr. Fantastic's Special. So adding tier 4 to this ability adds 70% damage, and it changes the stun from 50% to 100%. And that is really, really important. I mean, first off, 70% damage on a single target's not bad, especially when he's usually going to have offense up for this ability. But his important role is as a controller, and so having to coin flip for a stun as opposed to having a guaranteed stun, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You want to know that when you hit that ability, you're going to stun someone. So for me, this is a 4-star. Now we'll take a look at Mr. Fantastic's Ultimate. So adding tier 4 to this ability adds 60% damage. However, usually when you use this ability, he's going to have offense up anyway. So it's actually adding even more damage. So it's strong. It's certainly not necessary. He's not there for his damage, but because you get a good return on the amount of extra damage you can do, and because they're a bit of a front-loaded team, for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Mr. Fantastic's passive. So adding tier 4s to this ability, instead of adding 50% focus and resistance to himself and Fantastic Four and Namor, it instead adds 60%, so it's an extra 10% there. And then it changes from picking 2 random enemies and removing a positive effect to picking 3 random enemies and removing a positive effect. So both those things are good. They're not absolutely necessary. The 10% focus and resistance doesn't matter that much. I mean, the resistance is kind of nice, but Sue can remove debuffs anyway. The only person who really needs that focus is Johnny for applying his bleeds, and obviously Mr. Fantastic himself, but his focus is pretty good already. The bigger part of this passive that's more worth upgrading is the picking a third random enemy and removing a single positive effect. But because you choose a random enemy, he might pick a random enemy that doesn't have a positive effect. He might remove one random effect that doesn't have that much of an impact. So this can be good. It's definitely not necessary, but it's above average. So for me, this is a 3-star. All right, now we're going to take a look at the legendary Invisible Woman. All right, taking a look at her basic attack, adding tier 4s adds 40% damage, and it also increases the barrier she gives herself from 5% to 10%. So that's not bad. I mean, the 40% damage is pretty standard, and she doesn't exactly have high damage. In War, if she's benefiting from extra damage from Namor as well as Johnny, it can be okay, but all in all, it's just a pretty standard basic upgrade there. And then she does get the extra 5% barrier, but a lot of times she's going to be at full barrier, or how much barrier she has isn't really going to matter because they're going to blow up their enemies. So for me, this is just a 2-star. All right, now we'll take a look at Invisible Woman Special. So it goes from clearing 2 negative effects from the 3 most injured allies and applying stealth to the 3 most injured allies, to applying stealth and clearing those 2 negative effects from self and all allies. And this is really, really good, especially if you're using any characters that summon, like if you're running Ultron as the 5th on this team. But yeah, this is definitely one of the first upgrades to get. I mean, clearing negative effects from everyone can absolutely change the outcome of a fight, removing an offense down before someone's big attack, or removing a stun so someone is able to take a turn. And then obviously putting everyone in stealth based on what the rest of the ability does, it can be really important depending on who gets stealth and who gets to stay out of stealth. So for me, no brainer, this is a 4-star. All right, now we're gonna take a look at Invisible Woman's ultimate. So adding tier 4 to this ability changes both parts of the ability. It goes from offense downing for 2 turns 3 enemies to offense down for 2 turns all enemies, which is absolutely massive against any team that summons, like an opposing Ultron team. And then it goes from barriering all allies for 30% of her health to 40% of her health. Now this is important because the individual character's maximum barrier they can support is 30% of their own max health. However, Sue can provide barrier for up to 40% now of her own max health, which means that if there are characters that have higher health than her, like Thanos, Juggernaut, characters like that, they're going to reap the benefit of additional barrier from her. So giving out more barrier is good, and offense downing every enemy on the field for 2 turns is amazing. This is absolutely the very first ability you should upgrade. It is so good. This is a 4-star. All right, and now we're going to look at Sue Storm's passive. All right, so when you add tier 4 abilities to her passive, it increases the amount of damage she does when she retaliates by 50%, which is nice because she ends up retaliating quite a bit pretty much anytime anyone on that team takes damage after she's had her first turn. And then it also increases her own max health and the max health of the other Fantastic Four and Namor allies by 10%. So this is really, really good. However, I disagree with most people who say that this is essential. It is hands down very strong. However, I don't think it decides very many matches. Most of the time they're tanky enough to withstand anything, and very rarely are they just barely tanky enough. You know, if someone just gets annihilated on turn 1, usually it wasn't even close. And the extra 10% max health, it's certainly very good. The extra damage from her retaliation, it certainly adds up, but again, the amount of damage she's doing with that in the first place isn't that high, so I really, really do like this ability, and it's not wasteful if you've upgraded it, but I don't think that they absolutely need it to perform their intended task of blowing enemies up, so for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the Human Torch, Johnny Storm. So, when you add tier 4s to his basic, it increases the damage that he does with his basic by 30%. However, it also changes his bleed to last for 2 turns. And because you're upgrading the level of the ability applying the bleed, it actually increases the bleed damage from 135% to 150%. So this is actually a really good damage increase. However, it's a delayed damage increase. I mean, just the 30% on the basic isn't that much. However, the extra turn of bleed is, but The reason why I don't consider this essential, there's a couple reasons. It's certainly not bad. But the first thing is, anytime you're talking about an ability like a bleed, they've been introducing more and more characters who flip debuffs or who cleanse debuffs. So this is a 2-turn investment in getting that damage to land. And the reason why I don't think it's that important is because a lot of times on Johnny's 3rd turn, he just blows all the enemies up. So there are going to be plenty of people that will probably still have a bleed debuff because he normally doesn't use the basic until his turn 2. And then as soon as he takes his turn 3, he wipes out most things. So it's not a bad upgrade. I like it a lot. I don't think it's essential because most fights aren't going to get to the point where you'll get that extra damage. But for any longer content like Dark Dimension or possibly Ultima 7 where there's longer raid nodes, this actually jumps up in priority. It is a lot of extra damage getting that extra tick of bleed, but right now for me it's just a 3-star, but it is very strong. Alright, now we're taking a look at the Human Torch's special. So this changes a couple things. For one, he adds 2 turns of offense up to himself, and that's really important because outside of war, this is going to allow him to still have offense up when he does his ult, which is very important. And then he's also going to add a turn of offense up to all Fantastic Four Namor allies as opposed to just 3 random allies. So this is way better because you don't want, for example, to not get the offense up on the Thing, which can happen if you don't have this maxed out, and you definitely want the offense up for his ultimate. And it also adds 50% more damage to the attack, which of course he has offense up for. So this is just absolutely necessary, hands down, 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Human Torch's ultimate. So adding Tier Force to this ability adds 60% more damage to it, and you're almost always going to have offense up when you use it, so it's actually going to give you more value than 60% damage. It's going to even give you another 50% on top of that. And then it goes from offense downing 3 enemies to offense downing all enemies. And as previously discussed, the game, it's a lot more common to run into a lot of enemies. In particular, you're going to be using these guys in war, going against Ultron teams and things like that. And so because it's random, if you could choose the primary target that got offense down, 3 offense downs might be okay, but because it's random, you don't want an instance where there's a priority target about to do a big ability that doesn't get offense down, so you absolutely want that certainty of offense downing everyone, in addition to, of course, all the extra awesome damage on an already awesome ability. So for me, again, this is a no-brainer. This is a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Johnny's passive. So this does a few things. Firstly, it increases his own damage by 10%, and the damage that the Fantastic Four and Namor allies gain by 10%, which is pretty important because really their purpose right now, what they really excel at, is going into an Alliance war match and just blowing up the enemies. So more damage absolutely helps them do that, and they pretty much always have offense up, so you're really getting compounding extra value out of this damage. However, another really important aspect of it is instead of flipping 1 negative effect, it's going to flip 2 negative effects. And this can be really important. There's a lot of different negative abilities that it's very important to flip. If Johnny's blind, you definitely want to flip that into the stealth. If Johnny's got heal block, you definitely want to flip that into the death proof. If he's got offense down, you definitely want to flip that. He'll probably already have offense up, but it'll clear the offense down. But, you know, if he's... Actually, it won't work on stun, so that's a bad example. But there are a lot of debuffs that you definitely want flipped. And so if he has more than 1, it's a bit of a gamble. Whereas making sure you always flip 2, far more likely that he'll flip something that could have really hindered him. So in addition to all the extra damage, which really helps them with all the offense ups, it's also an extra layer of safety for Johnny. So I really like this ability. For me, it's a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. So, taking a look at Ben Grimm's basic attack, adding tier 4s adds 50% damage. So that is slightly higher than the average increase. However, Ben has the added benefit of having very high base damage, almost always having offense up on his team, and gaining extra damage from the passives from the people on this team. So, because this is a good bit above average for a basic attack, for me this is a 3-star, but it's definitely on the lower end of a 3-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the Thing's special. So adding tier 4 abilities to the thing's special adds 40% more damage to the primary attack, it adds 40% more damage to the bonus attack, and it guarantees that there are 2 bonus attacks instead of 1 with a 50% chance of having a second. So if you get unlucky without the tier 4s in this ability, you're going to do 420% total damage. You don't have to get lucky at all. If you put the tier 4s in this ability, you are always going to do 720% damage, which is a lot more. And as we already mentioned, Ben Grimm is often the recipient of offense up from his team. He's got really high base damage. He gets extra damage from Human Torch. If he's in war with Namor, he gets even more. So this damage increase is absolutely phenomenal. It is so much more damage. For me, this one's a no-brainer. This is a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the Thing's ultimate. Adding tier 4s to the Thing's ultimate adds 60% more damage. So that's certainly not bad. It's an ultimate, and it's just a single target attack, so it's not the most impressive, but it is slightly more valuable than other average ultimate upgrades. And again, all the things we've already mentioned, he'll usually have offense up, he gets extra damage from his teammates, so you get decent value out of this, but because of the longer cooldown on this, it's certainly not as important. So for me, on the lower end, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at the Thing's passive. So the Thing's passive adds 25% more damage to his Reflect, and it adds 10% more armor to himself and the Fantastic Four and Namor allies. So certainly not a bad thing to have. However, he doesn't get attacked that often because he doesn't actually have taunt, so there will be that window where he is the one out of stealth, and then shortly after Mr. Fantastic is the one out of stealth, so he's going to get hit a good bit, and obviously any AoE, but an extra just 25% damage isn't that crazy. And then the armor is nice, but again, it's not super essential. It's not a big enough armor gain that it makes them radically tankier. Ben Grimm in particular actually gains a fair amount of armor, but he's the only one. So this is a strong upgrade, but by no means is it essential. So for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the Submariner, Namor. So quick disclaimer on Namor. Namor is okay when used with the Fantastic Four outside of war, but he's just not that good outside of war. Now, inside of war, he's absolutely incredible. So if you're building this team up to use them as an Alliance War offense team, which it makes sense to do, then it makes sense to have a very strong Namor, and he gets way, way better with a lot of tier 4s. However, I personally don't love the idea of pouring too many tier 4s into him if the only time you'll get that value is in Alliance War, and they tend to do okay even with some of his abilities not upgraded for war. But if you're trying to pull off just some crazy punch-ups, maybe you're fighting an X-Men team, or you're fighting a crazy Ultron team, and you need 200,000 plus power worth of punch-up, then you might want to get a bunch of these tier 4s. Alright, starting off, we're looking at Namor's basic. Adding tier 4s to this ability adds 40% more base damage, but it also adds 10% more piercing. So not only is it doing the 50% more damage in total, but when you increase the piercing, you increase the amount that the normal damage does as well by reducing more of the enemy armor. So this is a well above average upgrade for a basic, and because if you're using Namor, you're probably using him in Alliance War, not only are you getting extra damage from Human Torch, you probably have offense up, and you're definitely, again, if you're using him in war, you're getting the benefit of his extra damage, so you get really good return on this. So for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Namor's special. So when you add tier 4s to this ability, you're adding 60% more damage to the primary and adjacent targets, and then if the target blocks, you're adding 20% piercing to both bonus attacks. So the main time that you want to use this is when you're hitting someone who has a deflect up, because that's going to guarantee that they block. So it's really good, especially in Alliance War, if you see enemies with deflect up. And if you're going to capitalize on that, it's going to add 60% normal damage, and then 20% piercing, and then 20% piercing. So that is an extra 100% damage to primary target and adjacent, and it's mixed damage, so it does quite a bit. So this is a really, really strong upgrade, and sometimes I prefer to open with this ability and save the ult for when the enemy has a bunch of buffs up that I need to actually clear. So especially if you're going to open with this and have the offense up, for me this is a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to look at Namor's ultimate. So adding Tier 4's this ability adds 50% more damage that you're going to do to everyone. And it's actually even a better value than that because it always crits. Instead of clearing 3 positive effects, you're going to clear all positive effects, which is really, really strong, especially against Ultron teams. And then instead of changing their speed bar, rewinding at 40%, you're going to rewind speed bar 50%. And this is unavoidable. It can't be countered. I mean, it's just so strong. You're pretty much always going to have offense up when you use it, especially if you're using it in Alliance War. You're getting extra damage from Human Torch and extra damage from Namor's passive. This ability is absolutely devastating. Hands down for me, this is a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Namor's passive, and it pretty much improves everything. He's going to gain 10% more damage and 10% more armor. Instead of spawning offense up for 2 turns to 3 random members and deflect for 2 turns to 3 random members, it's going to be offense up and deflect for 2 turns to himself and all Fantastic Four allies, which is really important because, again, you don't want the Human Torch or the Thing getting stuck without the offense up. You don't want Human Torch or Sue Storm getting stuck without the deflect, which they're going to need to survive. He gives an extra 10% damage to everyone in war, which is really, really good. And he gives an extra 10% damage to himself in war. I mean, it's unbelievable. This upgrades pretty much everything. And having everyone spawn with 2 turns of offense up and deflect is absolutely massive for getting all the damage gain for everyone. So, you know, I mean, he's gaining 20% damage. This is just so good. So for me, this is a clear 4-star. Alright, and lastly, gonna do a quick overview of Drax. We talked about Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy Orange Essentials, but because I really like him here, just gonna touch on him real quick. So his basic, it just adds 30% damage if you add Tier 4s. That's not important at all. That's very, very standard, and he's a tank, so it's really not that important what damage he does. So for me, that's a 2-star. Looking at his special, if you add Tier 4s, it goes from gaining 1 or 2 counter to always gaining 2 counter. This is a very, very negligible improvement on him, so this one's a 1-star. Looking at Drax's ultimate, it adds 30% more damage to the primary, 10% more drain. It'll always chain to an extra target and do 30% more damage and 10% more drain to the chain targets. But again, Drax is pretty slow. By the time he's using his ultimate, the fight is usually over. It's not that important, so for me, it's just a 2-star. And finally, looking at Drax's passive, it's going to add 5% more drain, which it's just plus 5%, so it's very standard, and that's a 2-star. But alright, so there you have it. That is what I believe to be the essential Tier 4 abilities for the Fantastic Four plus Namor. So thank you guys very much for checking it out. Let me know, obviously, what you guys think in the comments below. Shout out to ClanHQ for sponsoring this video. Shout out to Vet for doing an awesome job editing Orange Essentials as always. There should be a link to the infographic in the video description below. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Someone said it helps or something. I guess you should also click the sub button too or something. Something YouTube something. Anyway. Otherwise, I stream Marvel Strike Force every single day on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Khasino every day at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And also, anyone is welcome to join my Discord server, discord.gg/Khasino. We got blitz predictions, infographics, videos, content creator Q&A, data mines, and more. So anyone is welcome to come check it out. Otherwise, I already have the next Orange Essentials video already recorded, and that is going to be for AIM. So I will see you guys with that real soon. Until then, peace!